All right, everyone, welcome to the Food Justice is Housing Justice Workshop. Co-host today are Los Suarez. My name is Jo, and I'm from Hunger Free America. I do want to take a few moments to just say I am speaking from the physical space of New York City, and I would like to acknowledge the land on which I currently reside. Was historically a part of the Lenape, Canarsie, Rockaway, Wappinger indigenous peoples. We deliver a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the historical legacy of colonialism by honoring and paying respects to the land which was taken by conquest, along with the domination of the people who inhabit the land and the imposition of white supremacy. We do it to raise greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights as a small step towards equitable relationships, and reparation. We encourage the participants on today's call to privately acknowledge the land that sustains and supports you. If you do not already know the area's history, we have provided a link in the chat for you to learn about the indigenous peoples and their lives or lived in the area. If you're new to Hunger Free New York City, Hunger Free America is a national nonprofit building the movement that enact policies and programs needed to end domestic hunger and ensure that all Americans have sufficient access to nutritious foods. We do this through both direct service and advocacy work, both of which we feel strengthen each other. I am a program manager, and I work on the benefits access department. So my job is solely to ensure that New Yorkers have access to benefits such as SNAP and WIC. And I do that in a variety of ways, advocacy work, helping people get through the process of applying for SNAP or connecting to WIC. It's a safety net that is very much needed today, and many New Yorkers are applying for SNAP for the first time ever as we're dealing with this pandemic and COVID. HFA's work to end hunger is more pressing than ever. According to a report published by HFA in July 2020, the United States is facing the gravest hunger crisis in modern times, with more than 1 in 3 children missing meals or suffering from reduced portion sizes because their families don't have enough money for food. The rate of child hunger is 5 times higher than before the pandemic, and adult hunger is 2.5 times higher. As domestic hunger increases, all types of low-income families are suffering. The data shows that people of color are impacted at higher rates. HFA data shows in the spring of summer of this year, 41.1% of Black resident households experience food insecurity, as did 36.9% of Hispanic respondent households, in contrast to 23.2% of white respondent households. As a global pandemic and demand for racial justice collide, it is more important than ever to uplift MLK's message of justice. For over 2 decades, Hunger Free America has honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacies by coordinating service events and volunteer action supporting long-term solutions to hunger. With the year's Serve-a-Thon, our hope is that volunteers will learn something new, take action in the fight against hunger, as well as take away some ideas or how we can continue working towards supporting a more equitable community. As we begin the workshop, I'd like to introduce some group norms to frame our dialogue. A safe space is a brave space. We are called to create a brave space. We accept the likelihood that we will be uncomfortable when investigating issues of race, privilege, and oppression and our roles within them. Work to recognize your privileges. Use this space to recognize and investigate your privileges. For example, gender, sexual orientation, ability. Honor the different experiences we all bring to this space. Take risk. Lean into discomfort. We are all in process. Challenge yourself to contribute, even if it is not perfectly formulated. Actively listen. Use your energy to listen to what is said before thinking about how to respond. Notice when defenselessness and denials arise. If anyone has any norms to add, we welcome you to add those to the chat. I'd like to take a few moments to introduce you to our co-hosts, the real stars of the show. Today we got Zach Williams. Zach Williams has facilitated food programming at Southside United HDFC Los Suras since 2017, focusing on organizing people to expand food access in urban agriculture activities. Prior to this, he was a research fellow at the Fulbright U.S. Students Program in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, studying the city's innovative approach to food policy and programs that purchase food from family farmers for public institutions. Prior to this, he coordinated food programs with the Food Bank of New York City. Next, we got Jasenia Rodriguez. Is a New York City native, a 9/11 respondent, and an AmeriCorps member from 2019 to 2020 at the American Red Cross in their individual and community preparedness unit. She was awarded the Women's Who Lead Inspiration Award from the American Red Cross, Tiffany Circle, and also obtained an emergency management certificate from NYCEM during her service year. Currently, she is serving her 2020 AmeriCorps service year at Los Suras as their Comida Community Connector. And last but not least, we got Mr. Ruben Flores, who is a born and raised community organizer with Los Suras. There's nothing in my script that says a round of applause, but if everyone want to just do a little snap thing for our co-hosts, because they are the real stars of the show. And I thank you for taking some time to spend it with Hunger Free America and the wonderful participants of this Zoom meeting. Perfect. So I'm going to hand it off to our co-host. I don't know who would like to go first, but the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Zach Williams. I work with the food programs here at Los Suras. And I think Ruben, Jesse, I think we were kind of talking about is each of us would go through like a little section and then we would kind of open it up, ping pong a little bit. Is that still right?
That's about right.
Cool.
Yeah.
If anyone has, I guess with that, like questions or thoughts, Jo, thanks for the introduction. I really love how everything was framed and set. I would just say, yeah, if anyone feels like jumping in at any point, asking questions. I'm more used to doing, workshops and presentations in person in a group with lots of people. So I'd hope to keep that same vibe. If people have ideas or things they want to say, I would just say, jump right in. Can everyone hear me all right? Cool. I'm working off of the phone and the computer right here. So I'm going to give a brief intro to what Southside United Los Suras is and does, and then get into a little bit of our food work before kicking it off to the next people in the group. So maybe show of hands, how many people are familiar with Brooklyn, New York? Great. Williamsburg, Brooklyn. All right, south side of Williamsburg. Okay, so just really briefly, south side of Williamsburg is a dynamic, exciting neighborhood. It's where our organization is. Brooklyn has a long history, like Jo said, going back to Lenape peoples, farming this land, working this land, living on it, to colonization and all sorts of changes, industrialization. By the 70s, the situation in Brooklyn is similar to a lot of other parts of the city and other urban areas in the United States, where marginalized communities, particularly communities of color, here a heavily Spanish-speaking community, is being redlined and pushed out and disinvested on, you could say, by the city. The BQE highway was brought through the neighborhood, splitting the neighborhood in half in the second half of the 20th century. And there was a policy of planned shrinkage from the mayor's office, where basically they were cutting services and letting the neighborhood leaving the neighborhood, you could say, to its own power to survive. And so out of that situation in this neighborhood comes a lot of different activity. But one thing that happens is that people get together and start taking action to preserve housing in the neighborhood. So whether that's through advocating with the city, whether it's through repairing buildings, whether it's through squatting in buildings, taking political action, they start basically asserting their power as community members to establish an organization that today does housing work. So what does that mean? We operate dozens of buildings in the neighborhood, maintaining them, making sure tenants are taken care of, that are low income buildings for people who otherwise would be pushed out by rising rents, rising costs, gentrification, which is a huge part of the story of this neighborhood in the last couple of decades, and what many people think of when they think of Williamsburg, a playground for the rich, when really there's a community that is still here and has always been here, and is here today due to the hard work of its own people and of people at our organization who are working to maintain that. So today we manage buildings. We also have a pretty active housing resource team, which I think Ruben will speak to more, but doing direct work with people who are our tenants, but also more broadly in the community, whether it's on individual issues, I have a housing court issue, or I have a repairs I need in my apartment, or also collective advocacy. So getting people together to campaign for changes in laws and policies. We also have a social services team that has been around for much of that time, where, you know, in addition to fighting for housing and then organizing people around housing, people have other needs. They have economic needs, they have mental health needs, they have physical health needs. And the social services team has for a long time been working with people on benefits access and helping them read letters and helping them navigate difficult bureaucracies. And out of that work is where the food work comes at Los Sures. The social services team started a food pantry in the 90s that has moved around to a couple of sites, but it eventually came here where I am, 145 South 3rd Street in Williamsburg, which is a HUD senior building. So it's 6 or 7 floors of senior citizens, all 62 and up, who have their own apartment. And in the basement, we have the social services team and the food pantry, as well as giving out free food through that food pantry. A number of other food related things have happened. We have a senior center, which does a meal for 70 seniors during normal times for lunch every day, in addition to having a place where people can play dominoes, do Zumba, all of those sorts of some fun stuff you do at a senior center. But we're cooking and preparing a meal over there. And then also, we have a lot of spaces for gardening. And so at the space I'm at right now, since 2012 in the basement, there's been a hydroponic farm. I can maybe get you a little, if you want to get a little view, hope I don't mess it up too much. But here's one of the setups. Dun, 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 dun. Maybe it's not showing too well. It's too bright. It doesn't matter. We have hydroponics in the basement here since 2012. So for almost a decade, predating me when I was just a visitor to Los Sures before being on the team. And we also have chickens in the backyard at this site. We've also done a whole lot of landscaping and urban agriculture outside. So there's garden spaces sort of around the building and the parking lot behind us. There's a garden area, but also in the front, there were green spaces that we converted into gardens. And we've continued that work at other spaces. We opened a storefront cafe, we call it Cafe Ponico, where there's free coffee, but also it's a grow room basically with more hydroponics. And then we have other buildings that have outdoor spaces that have never really been landscaped or made accessible intentionally to the tenants in the community. And a lot of what I've focused on is bringing in the people who are involved in the housing organizing work and the advocacy work, bringing in the people who are working on the food access work, and seeing how can we start to organize and create some sort of collective will around maintaining those urban agriculture spaces. So bringing together the urban agriculture and the food stuff. And then without getting into it too deeply, because I want to pass the baton, that's a little bit about the food work and just the organization in general. And that's really what we were doing day in and day out until March. And so in March, I'm sure no matter where you were, everyone's life changed a little bit, right? It's been almost a year now, but almost a year since we've been in this pandemic. And it really caused a lot of disruption, not just in our neighborhood and across the nation and world, but within our operations. So quickly, we sort of canceled and shut down social services when social distancing came into place, switched over to phone calls, distance meetings. We do a robust tax program. There's like around 900 or 1,000 people who get their taxes done here every year. That was canceled last year because the guidelines for public health were not having people come inside, not having people be close together. The building management really switched over to full-time cleaning and sterilization and just making sure all of the spaces were safe and low traffic. And the food programs really kicked up a couple notches. So our numbers are up, depending on the month, up to 500% over where they were last year. We moved our pantry outside, and we started getting many, many more donations, not just from individuals and restaurants, but also from big suppliers that are in like the Feeding America network, the Food Bank for New York City, City Harvest, the city itself, HRA, where we were getting larger and larger shipments than we normally get. And we switched from being a direct service food pantry, doing it just out of our doors, to also distributing to other places in the neighborhood. So tenants associations and public housing, mostly Bushwick houses, Williamsburg houses, Taylor White houses, Berry Street South 9th houses. We did Cooper Park last week. These are all projects in North Brooklyn. Also other groups that are nonprofits, churches, and a group called Workers Justice Project that works with domestic day laborers, either in homes or people who are working out at sort of construction sites, job sites, a lot of them getting paid under the table. We started supplying those groups that already serve their community or represent their community, year round, with food, so that we could expand our reach and also leverage those connections. We're not able to feed everyone in North Brooklyn, but by working with our neighbors and by leveraging our connections, getting food in, we've been able to push out a lot over the last couple months. And so there's been challenges with that. There's been exciting things and changes. But I think before I go too much further, I want to pass it to Ruben or Jesse to talk more about, what those operations look like, the nuts and bolts, and then also the housing work.
Well, thank you, Zach. You pretty much said a lot of the stuff that I was about to cover. Yeah, we definitely, put it this way, impacted since I've been on. I came on in September, and we definitely had to increase, put it this way, the demands of volunteer help. And we worked with partner organizations such as New York Cares to basically meet the need for the volunteers. Definitely seen an increase in numbers from based on previous data that was collected to the data that's collected currently at the moment. There's a definite increase. And at the same time, with this increase in numbers of clients coming in, we still have to maintain that social distancing, trying to meet the compliant, trying to have everybody comply when most people don't want to. But everything so far has been pretty positive. Definitely, I would say I'm trying to work on the hydroponics and getting the ins and outs of it. So it's still like a testing phase for me. But definitely, like Zach said, we distribute to a lot of other locations. The need is there, the demand is high, and we just been putting it out as much as we can. So I'll pass the baton to Ruben.
Thank you. So pretty much, obviously, I'm not the food guy on this. I'm slowly learning about it. Right, when I joined the organization, I started learning about gardening and a lot of other hydroponic stuff, which I find fascinating now. But I'm the tenant organizer, community organizer for South Street and Lo it is. So my real job is mostly focusing on tenants' rights. right? Unfortunately, not only in this area of New Brooklyn, but everywhere else you go, you have what we call the good landlords and the bad landlords, the ones who abuse, the ones who will raise your rent out of nowhere, the ones who will do anything possible to get rid of you so they could flip and flop and make it better and pricier for newcomers, right? So one thing is that my unit does is spread the knowledge, right? Workshops, teach folks their tenants' rights. Yes, it's about to be a year, and I'm still not used to virtual workshops. I'm used to in person, hand down. This is how it is. This is how we should be doing things. But pretty much it was that. It's just the rights of organizing yourself as tenants, tenant associations, the rights to call 311 if your landlord isn't doing anything, right? If you have a leak or your ceiling is falling or whatever it could be, any little things, right? If your landlord doesn't do anything about it, 311, right? Get the city involved, put pressure on the landlords, right? As easy as the landlords could sue a tenant, vice versa, a tenant could sue the landlord as well for abuse. And unfortunately, we see that a lot, especially in Williamsburg, right? You think of Williamsburg, you think of it's trendy, it's pricey. Well, it's because of those reasons, right? Quick little history, because I was born and raised in Williamsburg in South Side. So I saw the change. I saw how back in the 90s, early 2000s, nobody knew what Williamsburg was, right? It was it's disgusting, it's dirty, it's a whole bunch of things. But next you know, in the blink of an eye, I started seeing construction. I started seeing I remember across the street from my house back then when I was probably in my early teens, there was an abandoned lot, right? So me and my friends would go there and play baseball. And then one day I wake up and you see a construction. You see the building. Now it's a high rise, right? High rise with studios and one bedroom apartments for 2,000 and up. Who could afford that, right? This is a community that's heavy, low income middle class, right? That we struggle day to day, right? It's bad enough that we struggle with rent, and now we expect us to pay that more, pay much more. And unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, a lot of folks had to choose between paying my rent or putting food on my table, right? So Southside United step up, and this fantastic food pantry came. Well, it's been around for a while, but they just really just twist the knobs, and we provided more food, while the housing organizings provided more of the access. Okay, this is what we should do, right? Hold your rent. If you have some type of rent, hold it off. Medicines, food is more important. We've been fighting for months to do housing moratoriums, which you all seen on the weekly briefings of the governor talking about freezing rent or holding off rent, right? It's working. Folks are holding off, but our biggest fear is by the end of all of this, landlords at the end of it, they still expect you to pay the rent, right? So if I'm a family of 3 who makes probably 20,000 a year, how can I pay a whole year of rent on one shot, right? So as activists, we fight for more rental assistance, right? For more some type of support, right? You probably all heard about cancellation of rent, right? We've pushed for things like that at the long runs, right? But this is our day-to-day fight to keep our families home, to keep our families, with a rooftop over their heads, right? To keep them all together. It's sad enough that many folks are forced to move from their homes, buyouts, etc. You'll be surprised at the amount of stories that I hear from families saying, I lived here all my life, and now unfortunately, my landlord knocked on my door, and there's a buyout. Now we have to live all the way in another state or something, right? Same thing for businesses, mom and pop stores, bodegas, like I call them, right? You walk around the neighborhood, you really don't see those bodegas, right? You don't see those mom and pop shops. Now you see high-end retail branding that, again, many people can't afford. So luckily, not only for us, but we have many organizations who fight, to keep those preservations, to keep those little lives alive. That's pretty much it on my end.
Well, I think that's a great like segue into sort of some of the more general stuff, which is, you know, okay, so here we are as individuals, and we're living our lives. We have many different things to think about every day, right? And I think two of the things that are maybe the most easy to feel fortunate about, but also the most easy to be somewhat take for granted, I guess you could say, are the fact that you eat mostly every day. If you have the ability, we do it to get by, and then we continue on with our day. And as well, for many people, we have a place to go at night. And so if you don't have those things, it's very apparent, right? You're very hungry and you're homeless or without a house. But when we do have those things, I think often we move on to other things in life that we have to do, spending time with people, working on projects, other quehaceres, chores, things you have to do. But I think that what we've seen is that when people are facing instability in one of those areas, it's not just isolated to that one area. And so truthfully, if you do have a housing issue, it becomes a food issue. And similarly, if you can't eat, it becomes much harder to handle your other issues because you're spending time trying to obtain food. And so I could keep going into other examples of that, but I think just to bring it home a little bit for the point of the workshop, housing justice and food justice are linked, in that if people don't have the nutrition to maintain their and their family's health, to be able to think straight and power through the day and focus on what they need, then they're going to need to get that first and foremost. They're going to have food as their primary need before they're able to write a letter to their landlord or meet with someone like Ruben to talk about what their landlord's letter says to them. And similarly, if they're dealing with those issues, first and foremost, a pending eviction, trying to pay the rent, then food often gets put by the wayside to the fact that, your health and the health of your family and your personal stress level and perhaps your lifespan are affected. And so on the other side, taking that from another direction, if you're able to address one of those needs, it helps out the other one. If you're able to put food on your table, that is less money that you have to spend to pay for food that you can now put towards rent. If you're able to maintain your housing, then you have more ability to go and meet your other needs. And so here we are in a situation, the pandemic, when multiple different factors have all become more extreme. Housing insecurity is more extreme. Income inequality has become more extreme. People have had a drop in income if they've lost their job for the most part. The government support that has been provided in lieu of allowing people to work because they're having to socially distance and their businesses are closed has been not enough for people to get by. $1,800, if you add together the $1,200, check and the $600 check from the federal government, can be, like Ruben was saying, less than a month's rent in a neighborhood like this. Certainly much, much more if you're, in luxury housing, but many people who are low income are paying, very high rents as well. And the point is, people are in unstable situations where they have multiple factors that are becoming more stressful or more difficult. And so what we've been able to do to start to address that is use the fact that we're a housing organization to also reach out to people and meet their needs. So we have all sorts of tenants where we've been doing wellness checks, checking in with them, making sure that they have their needs met, that they have whatever they need, but also giving out food. And from the pantry, I think we found that there are many other things that we can give out to people through that. PPE, hand sanitizer, medical supplies, donated jackets, things like this. By having a distribution point through the food pantry, we're able to maintain some level of service so that people are able to stay stable in those other aspects of their life while we're still on what is essentially an amended socially distant schedule. I think that's been challenging. Maybe Jesse and Ruben can speak a little bit to some of the challenges there with like keeping operations going. Also, like Jesse's the person coordinating, so I think a lot of the volunteers in and out. And so I think she can give you a good idea of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, what we're looking at. But I think the basic point I'm just trying to make without rambling too much is that people's lives are complicated, and that by addressing one issue that may seem isolated, you're actually creating a holistic change for them. If you're helping someone get food, You're allowing them to have an economic benefit, a nutritional benefit, and benefits in other parts of their life, family, housing, that may not seem directly linked to that can or that slice of bread, but actually are intimately linked. It's not just food, it's money, it's someone's health, and it's someone's ability to focus on other things in their life, which are vital to survival and well-being.
Yeah, Zach, you're pretty much correct about that. You know, as long as basically me as a parent, you know, just basically trying to struggle with rent and providing, put it this way, a food on the table for my kids. I found it very, you know, like hard to exactly tell my kid, hey, you can't eat today, because they wouldn't understand that. It's more like all they know is they're hungry and they need to eat. And that's that need that needs to be met at that moment. But also, like mentally, basically, having something to eat basically helps you out in so many ways. You know, I had an instance where I went camping and that night I didn't eat because I didn't like what was on the menu. um, but that night, you know, they were telling me, hey, eat something, because if not at nighttime, you're going to end up freezing. And lo and behold, that's what happened to me. I was out in the mountains freezing because I didn't like what was on the menu. So it's very important for, you know, one to have a meal at least, you know, once a day to just to survive, kind of thing. So, and the support that we're providing these people, it's beyond that, believe me. um there was one of the volunteers basically had asked me if she can take pantry to an elderly client that couldn't get away from her home, and she had an autistic daughter that you know, she was so afraid of going out because she didn't want to leave her elderly mother alone, that it's more like we had to bring these groceries to her in order to help them out. And you know, that was something that we made possible.
Going into just some of the sort of takeaways from this year, we did a survey. We have a number of people, different volunteers with different sort of professional levels and walks of life. And a group of us got together and did focus groups and a survey about people's relation to food during the pandemic. So just going through some of the responses, I guess, and the basic idea was we wanted to learn from people. You know, we know that people are isolated. We know that people are struggling. We know that there's housing issues. We know that these things were true before the pandemic, but by asking people directly, you can really get an idea of in what ways, and without assuming, without making generalizations. So we created a survey, we created focus groups, and we just asked those questions. You know, have you felt isolated? Have you had trouble getting food? What's that been like? So we can know more, and so we can inform our processes. So just going through some of the preliminary results, because we're still sort of crunching the numbers. 67%, so about 2/3 of the people we're serving are between the ages of 40 and 65. So they're adults above 40, 2/3 of them. And then 28%, another about third, is above 65. So that means that you're looking at almost 100%, 95% or so are above 40 or they're seniors. So these are older people. 84% of the people identified as women. So it's heavily, you know, older folks who are women who are coming to our pantry. Where people were born, people gave answers of all sorts, so the numbers aren't unified on here. It's hard to say. People wrote, for instance, you know, just to pick one country that was written many different ways: Dominican Republic, República Dominicana, DR, Santo Domingo. We have to put all those together, so we just get one Dominican Republic response for that. 94% of people are Spanish speakers, and 48% also speak English, a lot of bilingual. 57% live in our zip code. A third of people, 30%, it was their first time coming to the pantry. So we're serving around 600 people at our pantry a week. And we've had numbers that have been much higher than they usually are for a long time, but we didn't realize, a third of those people are new. So there are people who before this, even though our pantry's been around for decades, they needed food possibly, or our pantry was meeting people's needs in the neighborhood. There still were people who did not have the acute need for it, or did not have the reason to come get food until now. 95% of people heard about us through word of mouth, neighbors, friends, family. So we're not getting the word out online so much. It's not through flyers or printing or social media. It's through word of mouth. We had 40% of people said they had difficulty accessing medical and safety supplies. The biggest one was hand sanitizer. The next one was masks. So 78% of people said they had trouble getting hand sanitizer. 60% said they had trouble getting masks. And then as well with just community resources, half of people said, 50% even, said they were accessing new benefits that they weren't accessing before. 20% were unemployment. 66% were saying stimulus and pandemic EBT. And then let's get into a couple more. I don't want to bore people or put people to sleep. Now we got heads shaking. This is exciting. Okay, we'll keep it going. So we asked people, during the 2020 pandemic, how has your need for food assistance changed? Same, less, or more? 48% said they need more. 47% said they needed less. And 4.7%, so just under 5%, said they had the same need, or said they had less need for food assistance. So 5% of people said they needed less now, whereas the other 95% either had the same need or more. Same with eating balanced meals. 30% of people said it's often true that they can't afford to eat balanced meals during the pandemic. Another 30% said it's sometimes true. So it's 60% compared to 40% who said it wasn't true that they needed to skip meals or have balanced meals, I should say. And then we got to questions about, our own, people's ability to pay rent and their income. So 56% reported having less income, 42 that had the same amount, but only 1.2%. We only had one person out of our about 100 surveys who said they have more income now. Everyone else has less income, 56%, or the same, 42%. How has your ability to pay rent changed? 53 said it's been harder to pay rent. 46% said it had the same ability to pay rent, but 0 have said that it was easier for them to pay rent. So everyone said it was either harder, which was a majority, or it's the same for them. 10% of people say they don't have health insurance. 45% said that they were impacted health-wise by COVID-19. 45% said that they or their family were impacted by COVID-19. And then we asked people 1 or 2 words, how they felt mentally and emotionally during the pandemic. We want to just open-ended, see what people would say. So just reading down this: good, bien, anxiety, estresada, regular, sad, distressed, deprimida, depressed, normal with confidence, triste, cansada, not good, worried, stressed, afraid, panic, difícil, mal, stressed, isolated, depresiva, enferma, quiet, very bad, she had the virus, allergy, frustration, decayed, depressed, alone, good, a little bit stressed, anxiety, deprimida, afectada, worried, scared, stressed, depressed, anxiety. So I think you can see just by running down that list, I'm just reading individual answers. You have a couple positives in there. I'm good, I'm not. And then a lot of people who've been feeling really in a tough spot. And so we were able to find, by asking them sort of open-ended questions about what we were doing, and then also some closed ones. For instance, during the 2020 pandemic, has the Los Studios Community Food Pantry helped you access food? 88%. So the vast majority said it was often true that we helped them access food. And so when we look at that, and we look at some of the focus group responses, and the fact that people are still obviously dealing with so many issues, it gives us a little roadmap of, who are we serving? So we're serving older women for the most part. What have they been facing? Well, they, are having a lot less income. They're feeling stressed. And this many people are saying that they are having trouble paying the rent. it gives us an idea of other things that we could do. Maybe we need to be doing some sort of emotional support trainings. Maybe we need to bring clowns to the line or keep it respectful in general, just make it a more welcoming place. Maybe we need to help get out more PPE. Maybe we need to focus on masks and sanitizers, not just gloves or face masks. Maybe we need to be doing more education around where people can get mental health resources or referrals, things like that. But whatever the case, I think we found that it's been a big year, but also that in many ways we're meeting people's needs by being there, by asking them, and then responding to those questions. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Maybe Amy or Jo, if you want to redirect us. I don't know what things are looking like.
You're doing good. We're gonna try to aim to do the Q&A by 3:15, but we could do it now if you want to as well.
I mean, I see 3:14. I'm down. Jesse.
No problem. All right, folks. So now we're going to open up the floor for questions.